everyone. This is Diane Rasmussen with UK Column. I'm really happy to be here today speaking with Professor Richard Ennos. He is Emeritus Professor of Evolutionary Biology at University of Edinburgh, and he is also the chair of Knowledge Edinburgh, which I have been involved with along with Richard for a little bit of time now. Really happy to be hearing from Richard today on what he's been doing over the years to raise awareness locally in Edinburgh, which I hope will inspire others around the country to get involved locally and regionally to see what we can do to fight the globalist agenda and all of the other things that they're using to kind of keep us in our places. Richard has done a lot of inspiring work over the past few years, and we will get into that in more detail today and leading up to the conference that we had most recently, just a few days ago up in Edinburgh. So Richard has been with us previously on UK Column News, but today we'll be having a more extended discussion, and I'm really looking forward to this. So Richard, again, thank you for coming with us today on UK Column.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, it's great to be here with you. If you maybe you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and maybe a little bit about Common Knowledge Edinburgh, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, as you said, I'm a retired professor of evolutionary biology at Edinburgh University, and I was retired in 2020, and very concerned when the lockdowns came. Wrote to everybody in my department, saying that we shouldn't do this, and nobody gave me, I think one person gave me some support about that. I joined a resistance group in Edinburgh at that time, and we had clandestine meetings for about 4 or 5 months. I took part in protests and talking and speaking at rallies, and that didn't seem to get anywhere. I was at one point arrested, but released very, very shortly. Just anti-social behavior order placed on me. We sort of finished off we came to the end of rallies. That didn't seem to be getting anywhere. So the next thing that we did was we did the yellow boards. And so we stood outside and held up the yellow boards. That was mainly about vaccines and the imposition of vaccines on people without any informed consent. And that was a very cold winter. We stood outside. People went past. They hooted their horns. They agreed with us. But again, we didn't seem to be getting anywhere. At one point, somebody came past and said, "Don't you know there's a war on?" And that was a point when they flipped from the interest in COVID to the war in Ukraine. And we sat down and we thought, well, we're not getting anywhere with the yellow boards now. What should we do? And I sat down with Matthew Wilson it was just the two of us together, and we were both in education. And what we felt was that people actually need to know more about what's going on. How can we inform them? And so we set up a little group, and we held meetings every 2 weeks or so, trying to inform people about what was going on. And one of the things that we felt was really important was that we had face-to-face meetings. At that time, everyone was trying to get us to go online, and you can't interact properly online at all. But if you're with other people, it's really inspiring. You can swap ideas. You can be informed and inspired. And we kept that. We set up the group at that time. The group was called Common Knowledge. So what we wanted was that what was going on should be common knowledge, and that was the reason for calling it common knowledge. And at that time, we had maybe 20, 30 or 40 people at meetings. We had a very wide range of meetings. So we were concerned with health. We were concerned with education. We were concerned with the trans agenda. We were, during that period, cancelled twice. First of all, with the Quakers, who We had some concerned parents came along and told us about their concerns about the transgender issues, with the things that were being taught at schools. They were very level-headed, but nonetheless, the Quakers felt that this was not something that they could support. They could also not support us when we had two people who had been vaccine injured, and they felt that they could not have a meeting with people who are vaccine injured. So we were cancelled there. But we kept going. We found places where we could hold meetings, and we've had really quite successful meetings. And we've also formed a group of people who have common interests from a very, very wide range of backgrounds. And I think the great thing about common knowledge is I lost a lot of friends as a consequence of speaking out about things, but I also gained an awful lot of friends, and still have those friends in common knowledge. So to me, this is something which is really, really important, keeping this going. And more recently, what we've been trying to inform people about what's going on. But one of the problems with that is that you're always fighting rearguard action. You're always responding to what's going on around you. And what we felt needed to be the case is we want to be a group which is positive and doing things which are positive. How can we help other people make the world a little bit of a better place? And so that's the way in which we're trying to take the group in the last year or so. So away from just telling people about how awful the situation is, it's very important to do that, of course, but people also need to be given hope. They also need to be inspired. And they also need to realize their own power and what they can do individually. And to me, the most rewarding thing about the group is that there are people there who've never spoken before in public, and they've got their act together and they've told us about things and they've spoken in public, and it's empowered them, and they feel very much more settled as a consequence of that. They've shown that they can do something. And so people have spoken. And we've also set up what's called a RECO ring. So this is an organization where we are going out to farmers and buying directly from farmers and other producers and selling directly to our members. And this is to get around the problems that people have about finding food that is ethically and ecologically well produced, finding that at supermarkets. We're bypassing the supermarkets, and we're setting up a system whereby people can buy directly from farmers and consumers who they know and have had personal contact with. So those are the kind of things that we've been doing. And I'm also really happy that one of our members, having seen the education system and the demise of the Scottish education system in particular, one of our members is now the headmaster of a newly founded school where they're not using any IT during the lessons, and they're going back to the old ways, and they're giving their pupils a sound start in life. So to me, forming a group is really important because people who are starting out on something new get support, and people are inspired to do something and to show that their individual efforts can actually make a difference.
No, that's great. It's great to hear that introduction. Thank you for that. And, I will have to say that I've noticed over the past 2 years, I guess it sounds like you started in 2022 then, if you are mentioning Ukraine war, that especially in 2020 and 2021, that was when they really put all this into action, right? Where a lot of people that maybe weren't paying attention to what was happening in sort of we can say the globalist arena, or even the UK government itself, what they were planning for us, really a lot of people became aware in 2020 because it was such an impact on all of our lives. Where, as you said, I was still as well working in university in 2020, and I was not personally able to say much because I was not retired. and
Yeah.
as you know, there was a lot of clamping down on, well, we don't know if it was clamping down or if it was just that people were just accepting what they were told, which, I'd like to hear you speak about that, because you and I have spoken about this before. The academic environment at the time, which is where we're all supposed to be highly trained, highly educated people, were just kind of accepting what they were told. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your experience as someone who was going into retirement, luckily, in 2020.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be retired at that time, but I still I had a room still in the university which I shared with other people, and I went in there most days, and I was finishing off work that I had been doing at the university, and still had ties with PhD students and so on. And so at that time, what I did was I saw what they were trying to do with the lockdowns, and I wrote a letter to everyone in the department saying that as scientists, we should say this was completely wrong. We already had the data at that time about how serious so-called COVID was, and it wasn't serious, and there was no problem, and people should not have been locked down in any way. And I wrote a long email, well, a lengthy email about that, pointing out that as scientists, it was our duty to stand up and say that this was wrong. I got one reply, which was supportive, and the other people told me that, oh, no, this disease is terribly serious, 15% death rate. That was from one of the professors. They're completely unable to stand up to any of this. And to me, that was absolutely shocking. That they're supposed to be trained scientists, and yet the evidence was there, the data was there, and all he had to do was call it out and say, no, this is wrong. But that didn't happen. And I got some emails saying that I must have been looking at some very dodgy websites, and and my ideas were all wrong. So that was difficult. My other experiences with the university, well, I remember when people were supposed to wear masks, and going into meetings, and people went into a meeting with the PhD students. Academics wore masks, sat down, took them off, spoke normally, stood up, put their masks back on, and went out. And I just couldn't understand this kind of behavior. It's totally irrational. And I was just wondering, what's happened to people's thought processes? What's happened to their critical thinking? And I had to conclude that actually people in our group who were window cleaners, they had more common sense than the academics. And they stood up for what they knew to be correct, coming from their common sense. So I'm afraid I've never really regained that respect that I once had for a lot of the colleagues that I had. I wasn't personally hounded by anyone at the university, though I think I was spoken of in disparaging terms by certain PhD students, but that's not serious to me. But those are the kind of experience I had at that time.
Yeah, I still remember the reaction that I had in March 2020 when they told us, I'm sure it was a similar thing at universities everywhere at the time, where they sort of said, well, pack up your books and whatever you need and go home, and it would be 2 weeks to flatten the curves, or whatever that they were saying at the time, which of course didn't happen. And I remember having a very emotional, visceral reaction to it, because my whole life was my students, my office, my lab group, my classes, and that was everything. And I was on campus every single day. And then suddenly to be told to take all of that and just move it to your house didn't make any sense to me.
No.
And I remember being very seriously worried about the impact on the education of the students as well, because how are they going to get the same quality education watching a recording of a lecture than they would have been able to get in the classroom? And I remember lecturers being told, well, if you don't have a webcam where you can record a lecture, record it on your phone. And I'm thinking students are paying fees and giving up years of their life and putting their education in the hands of someone who's going to record a lecture on their phone in their kitchen. And this is meant to be the university experience. Yeah. And I was, being a program director at the time, I had a lot of pastoral responsibility for the library students at that time. And I remember seeing a lot of mental health issues and a lot of academic issues as well. We could go on about this for a while, but I think it's just an important thing to note, because I think that maybe people don't understand entirely. And I've actually been working on a series of articles that's on the UK Column website, mostly led by Hugh McCarthy, who I know that you know as well. Mm-hmm. We've been doing a whole series of articles on the impact of lockdown and what happened after that on education. And I think this is a very important point, because there are so few of us from education who have realized it at the time, and still even maybe not even realize now, despite the fact that scores are down, the impact this has had on education of people of all ages. So thank you for being one of the few of us that spoke up at the time.
It's easier when you're retired, but
it certainly is. Yeah. But the rest of us had to do what we could, which was, for me, not easy. As I will say that.
Yeah.
But it's
when I came back to a lab meeting, and when I came to the lab meeting, all of the students had masks on.
Yeah.
And I got cross with them, and I told them, why are you wearing masks? Oh, we're being kind to other people. I said, you're not being kind to other people. You're just inducing fear in other people. Have some spine. Went back the next week, and there was only one mask the second week. They shamed them to take them off. So it was good.
My first time back on campus wasn't until, I think, autumn of 2021. And I didn't realize that they had put this sort of track and trace system in place. Like, I knew that, I didn't have my university ID with me because I hadn't been on campus. I just wasn't carrying it with me and forgot that I needed it. So I was allowed to come back in, didn't have my ID to swipe to get into the building. And there was a colleague walking in front of me, and he said, "Where's your ID? You need it for track and trace." I said, "I don't have it. Can you please just let me in if you've got your ID?" "Well, it's not safe. We need track and trace." This was another lecturer who was about to not let me into my office. And then I remember getting into my office and seeing a wall calendar that was still on March 2020, despite it being September 2021, and a pack of biscuits that was very highly out of date. So those are the things I will remember forever. So at this time, when you and Matthew were talking about forming common knowledge, and of course the importance of people and connection, because I think that was one of the things that they really wanted to take away from us, was the ability to connect with others. And did you start organizing events and talks immediately, or was it just a small group of you at that point?
There was about 20 of us at that time. And we had a constitution. We set up a proper constitution. We had the first meeting. We set up a bank. Well, we set up a bank account and everything like that. So it was a properly formed organization. And that was quite tricky, because what you find when you get a group of people together is that they're on the same general page, but there's often lots of little niggling things that can prevent it. But the great thing was that there were people there and I asked them, could you give us a talk? There's somebody who was homeschooling at that time. Could you give us a talk about homeschooling? And they said yes. And they were really positive. And I'll always remember that, because those are the people that you want. And that's what you want to encourage. People who say, yes, I can do it. And that's really inspiring to everybody else. And it started everything. And people who hadn't spoken before or people who hadn't spoken for a very long time, they stepped up to the mark and they came and they told us about things. And to me, it was a real education because you realize that in your working life, you only see a really quite small proportion of society. And here I was hearing from a huge range of people, and they all had things to tell me and to educate me. And I just realized how ignorant I was and how much I didn't know. And, I'd only just woken up in 2020 and I had an awful lot to learn. And they taught me. It was like my new university. And to me, that's great. I've always liked learning new things. And when you learn for the first time about how the world works, it's really eye-opening. It's disconcerting in some ways, but I never want to turn back. That was great.
Yeah, I think it's as Brian Gerrish always said, and he said at the time on UK Column back in that time period, once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep again.
No.
And I think that's where, well, we both are there, obviously, as well as a lot of our viewers. But what we hope to do with UK Column, and as I'm sure you hope to do with Common Knowledge Edinburgh, is to continue to wake up more people, as well as support those of us who are already there with us. Could you maybe tell us about those cancellation stories that you had when you were trying to book venues and events? I know you've got a few of those.
Yeah, as I say, we had the we hired the Quaker Hall, and they were worried about what we were saying. So one of them came and sat in on a talk that we had, which was about water, and that went down fine. But it was a doctor. He was concerned that there were some people there who didn't believe in viruses and couldn't understand how that could be the case. Anyway, when we said that we were going to invite some people who had been vaccine injured, then they said, no, we won't allow you to have that because that would be spreading misinformation. And then these women who came for the trans agenda, they also, to talk about what was going on in schools, they came along to that meeting, and they were horrified by what was people just telling it as it was, and the concerns that they had about the education that their children were being given, and they said that we were discriminating against trans people. We weren't doing that at all. We were talking about the education that was being given to children and the taking away of the innocence of children, which I think is one of the most despicable things that you can do. Funded ultimately by us, because we've been paying for the education system. And so we were cancelled there. At a later time, we're going to hold a conference, which was the Scottish People's COVID Inquiry Conference. And that was with the Methodist Hall. And when they found out what the subject was, they declined to hold our conference there. So there have been a number of people who've, when they see that you're talking freely about difficult subjects, they don't want to be involved, and they feel that they cannot sanction that. So that's a shame.
Yeah,
and especially coming from religious groups as well, because that was somewhere where I was hoping that there would be some pushback about what was going on, some thoughts about the ethics of what was happening, but we didn't seem to get that from any of the religious groups at all.
No, and I remember observing at the time in Scotland, and I'm sure this is true around the country, was that they were using religious places like churches and mosques and other places as places for testing and jabbing people. And they were not having church services, but you could go in there and get your jabs. And I remember, which raises a lot of questions, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went into a church it was a Church of Scotland in Edinburgh that I attended in 2022. I was just trying to sort of get out and meet people. So I thought, well, it's a Sunday morning. Maybe I'll go just attend this church, see what it's like.
Mm.
And it was kind of an interesting thing where I remember the minister said, well, the restrictions have changed, and now we can maybe start singing a hymn, because apparently singing would have killed you back in 2020. You couldn't sing a hymn, you couldn't have your choir. And then they were saying, maybe in the future we'll be able to sing two hymns. It was sort of, again, that was that, because I know that common knowledge is all about being pro-human and pro-connection, but that was to me, a very anti-connection, anti-human act, because the singing of hymns and the sharing of music in a church service can be powerful for people. And they were taking that away as well.
Yes. Yeah, yes, very anti-human. And, well, I mean, I was really shocked when at the school they wouldn't let children sing happy birthday to people whose birthday it was. I think to me, that's really shocking. And in a church, then there are people who are, they're grown up and they can understand what's going on. Doing that to a child, to me, was horrendous. Taking away all the trust that you place in children place in adults, and not living up to that trust. I thought that was actually terrible.
Yeah, and I think some of the talks that you've had as well on education, on the so-called curriculum for excellence or lack thereof, as we've said in Scotland, have been really helpful for people. I think that was the very first common knowledge event that I attended, was when they were speaking about the curriculum for excellence not being excellent.
Yes.
And that was by actually a member of the Scottish Union for Education, which of course we have some cross connections with at the same time. And, and I think the political climate can be different in different ways, just even around the UK. I personally found Scotland to be more restrictive than even in other parts of England and even other parts of the country. So I think I can understand how it would be difficult to find the venues that would support you, because in Edinburgh in particular, we have to look at local context always, that is not going to be the most permissive environment, I would say, locally to be able to speak freely about the things, despite this, being, what happened to Scotland the Brave and, freedom and William Wallace. We see how people have been behaving in Scotland the past few years. And it seems to me that that's something that has unfortunately been lost in the culture. So I think you guys have been doing great work and doing what you can to try to push this forward a little bit.
Yeah. I just wish people had more courage, because that's all it takes, a little bit of courage, and just to have the courage to say what you really think, and not to worry about this social pressure on you, but to be yourself, and to tell people what you really think, because I'm just thinking back to the times when we did the yellow boards. We would have 10 minutes where no one would poop a horn and agree with us. And then one person would hoot their horn in agreement with what we were putting up on the yellow board. And immediately there'd be 2 or 3 other people hooting their horns. They'd been given permission by the person who'd hooted their horn the first time around to be able to express their opinion. They shouldn't need to be given permission to express their opinion. They should express their opinion, no matter what what happens around them. And I find that very sad. If people have more courage and they're able to say what they really think, they'll find out that there are far more people than they realize who actually agree with them.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's interesting to see as well. I think starting in 2020, I think it became even more difficult for people to want to say what they thought, because there was so much pressure from the media, from the government, from all of the sort of larger powers that kind of control what happens, that there was just the fear was everywhere.
Yeah.
In UK column at the time, Mike Robinson, Brian Garish, they were one of the few places I have to say, and of course, I wasn't working for UK column at the time, but I was certainly watching them, as a lot of us were. It was one of the places where I think people could go to get information about what was actually going on. And for those of us who felt we needed a place to go, where people would understand, where we could actually understand what was happening, I thought that was an incredibly important resource for people to really strip back the narrative and see, no, this is not at all what's happening when you look at it from underneath. And, I think back a lot to, if 100% of us had complied with everything, we would still probably be in an even more restrictive environment today in terms of free speech and sharing opinions. And of course, we know, they tried to put the hate speech laws on us up in Scotland with Hamza Yusuf and the hate monster ads that were saying, the hate speech, you're going to come to your door if you use some hurty words. And that certainly didn't help anything up in Scotland at the time.
No.
But again, it just shows the courage that your group has had over the past few years. It has been incredibly remarkable.
Yeah, well, I just think it's normal. That's the way it should behave normally.
Should be.
Yeah.
So let's speak a little bit about the COVID inquiry, Scottish People's COVID Inquiry Conference, and how that all came about. How did you get the idea for it, and then what it turned into, which I thought it was a great event. But I'd like to hear from your perspective how this all developed.
Yeah, well, I think I've been alerted to what was going on at the Scottish COVID inquiry, the official one, by somebody who goes under the name Bile Phenom. And he had meticulously put together recordings of people giving evidence at the Scottish COVID inquiry, which are actually absolutely damning. And they were also very emotional, talking about what happened to their parents, for instance, who were in a care home. They were locked up for like 14 days at a time. Some of them died alone. Some of them obviously were given inappropriate medical treatment and as a result of that died. And these are absolutely heartrending. And this all evidence, and there's very well documented evidence. And what I did was I spent about 3 months looking through all of that evidence that had been given in writing. And it's still all there, I think, about people's experiences. And that drove me on. And I thought to myself that we really must have a conference which tells this story, because it's not getting out. So I got together groups of people, groups of speakers who could talk about all of the different aspects of the COVID event. So we had yourself talking about what the role of the media was. We had somebody who was a public health expert speaking. We had people coming from the medical profession who are concerned with medical ethics. We had people concerned with vaccines and the appropriate use of vaccines. And we also had people who came and gave personal testimonies of what had happened to them. And they gave very powerful talks. They weren't necessarily, public speakers themselves, but they were motivated. They wanted other people to hear about what had just happened to them. One person who'd lost their father, another person who'd lost their brother as a result of the medical negligence and various other things that had happened to these people. And really, I wanted to kind of make a statement. This is what actually happened. And we also had Martin Neal looking at the actual data about when people died, what they died of, and coming to the conclusion there was no pandemic. And the deaths that we saw were due to the measures that have been taken, which had taken away people's freedoms, imposed improper medical treatment, and taken away those people's dignity as well. And so that to me was really important, to have a statement about all of this that came not from the government, but came directly from the people, and the people who had been affected especially. And I kind of see that as drawing a line under this in a way. I know it doesn't mean I want to forget about those things, but I just wanted to have a statement there, which people can go back to, and they can see what people really thought at the time. Often when one's going through a period of time, and then people talk about it later on as if it was history, that wasn't how it happened at all. The history is a complete rewriting of what actually happened. I wanted to have a record which was close enough to the time, which gave people a real impression of what had gone on. And that's on the UK column, and I hope that stands as a record of what actually went on. So there's a reason for holding that particular conference. And the motivation was reading through all of these transcripts of what had happened to people. And I sometimes sat at my desk and I was crying because hearing what had happened to people and how terrible it had been. And yet there were other people who were completely unaware of this. As they said, oh, well, I had a good lockdown, But there were people there who were suffering dreadfully, and their whole families that were suffering dreadfully. And I wanted them to have a voice. And so that was a reason for holding that inquiry.
Yeah, those personal testimonies were incredibly moving. The people that lost people in care homes, and also things that I've heard over the years. I guess when people talk about the breakups that they've had with relationships breaking down, losing family members, losing friends, as you mentioned at the beginning, this has all been kind of a readjustment of those of us who have lost relationships and those of us who are now creating new ones of all types. Unfortunately, for some people who've lost relationships with family members, that hasn't returned for everyone, even still, where they're still saying, well, no, you can't come over for the birthday or the Christmas because you were never vaccinated and we don't feel safe being around you. That I still was hearing that even last year, as recently as Christmas 2025, people not being allowed back into their family settings. And so those of us who, just speaking generally around the world, who lost people to vaccines, to some of the protocols that have been out there, the midazolam protocols, the ventilators, there's still a lot of controversy going on around that. People who are vaccine injured, who may or may not still be with us, and those who are still with us have very poor quality of life in some cases. There's a range of things that I think was really important to get out there. And I hope that those who were there feel as though they had a chance to either make their voice heard or hear that they were not alone in the whole thing, despite the severity of what a lot of people went through at the time. So thank you so much for getting all of that together. I know it was a lot of work, but I think it made a big difference for the people who were there.
Yeah, well, it was at that time that you were doing something on UK column at that time, and I was able to get in touch with you, and you came and joined us, and that was really great, and we've really appreciated all your expertise and everything that you've helped with in terms of media and helping us to look at how you might have a media which is properly informed and ethical.
Yeah, there's not much of that going on around, unfortunately, when we look especially the mainstream sources. But I think that was what was really good, I think, about the ability to be able to share that at the conference when I talked about the media that we were seeing, largely the mainstream sources that most people were seeing in 2020 and 2021. First, it was the people falling flat on their backs in Wuhan, saying, well, that ridiculousness, but people believed it, right? And then going into the things that were getting people to line up to get jabbed, all of the queuing and all around. And I remember we had the Christmas party, and was that when we had Sonia Poulton? That was 2024, I believe. Mm. And people, I think it was another member of Common Knowledge at the Christmas party gave me an old newspaper from, I think it was from Manchester, of the Get Boosted Now campaign. Get boosted now. It's safe and effective. Get your boosters. And so this wasn't just the light paper, where obviously they were talking about this at the time, but these were the mainstream papers. And people have given me a few of those over the years. And when you go back and look at how ridiculous it actually was, it's just amazing thinking back that, I mean, people didn't know there was the fear campaign. People were terrified, but it was just, when you look back and put it back into perspective, it looks ridiculous looking back on it now.
Yes.
But at the time, on a daily basis, people were being terrified by the media, by Nicola Sturgeon, by Boris Johnson, by Matt Hancock, all of those people at the top that need to be held responsible for what they were telling us. But it goes all the way down, all the way down into any local officials, anybody who was the GPs who were irresponsibly, potentially not even looking at what was going into people's arms at the time, which we now know had serious, serious problems. There was just a lot of lack of accountability and responsibility of people in positions of power, and everyone, and unfortunately, not everyone, but if you believe official statistics, around 80% of people in the UK lined up and took whatever they were told to put into their bodies. So now we are where we are now, unfortunately, which makes me think about the next major event that Common Knowledge had, which was the Food and Health Festival, which, again, I think was a great success. Charles Mallett came up and did a talk for us last year. So maybe if you want to talk about what led into that event also.
Yeah, well, that was something that came out of the establishment of the RECO ring, where we're buying food directly from producers. And I think one of the concerns that people have is that health is very much related to the food that we eat. And the quality of the food that we have has been degraded over the years, and they feel that people need to have access to the very best in food, and that will be something that will have a huge positive impact on their health if they can get in touch with and being supplied with healthy food. So the idea there was to bring together those producers and give people a chance to see all these people who were contributing to the RECO ring. We also had talks at the same time about the practices that those particular farmers were employing. And so the idea, a lot of them had many of them had come from situations where the farming practices were actually causing not only an ill health to the people who were eating the food, but also to the farmers. So incredible high use of fertilizers and herbicides, which are incredibly damaging, and also ecologically incredibly damaging. And what they wanted to do was turn that around and to produce food in a way which was in keeping with the ecology, in tune with ecology, and to restore those farming systems. So part of the Health and Food Conference was to give them a chance to tell us about what they were doing, their regenerative farming, and how they were conducting their agricultural businesses. Very difficult for them because they wouldn't be getting any subsidies to do things like that. But they knew what they wanted to do. They knew it would be difficult, but they still were doing it. And I really take my hat off to people who are like that, who know what the right thing to do is. And despite all of the obstacles that are put in their way, and despite the fact that they're not going to be rich people in the end, if they're doing things the right way, then they're getting satisfaction out of it, and also then they can teach, they can go on, and they can be beacons for other people and take that knowledge and help other people go down the same kind of path. So that was, I guess, one of the things I enjoyed most about the food and health conference that we held.
Yeah, no, it was great, and to really be thinking carefully about what we put into our bodies and what we do to repair our bodies. Because there were also some alternative health practitioners there as well.
Yeah, there were.
And yeah, so I remember there was Annie Barr was there, who's also given a talk for Common Knowledge. She seems to be incredibly knowledgeable in a range of alternative treatments for health issues.
Yeah.
There was I believe there was massage there, some sort of shiatsu.
Yeah, there were two people doing massages as well. Yeah. So I think in terms of medicine, or in terms of health, if you're in the medical profession, it's very difficult to work outside or to get outside the mainstream. There are so many restrictions on that, but people are doing that, and it's really good to see those people who have decided that following protocols is not medicine, and there are alternative ways of going about medicine which maybe not practiced in the NHS, but there are alternative ways, and it's good to hear from those people. Many of whom have had a very traditional medical upbringing, but they've been re-educating themselves about what's the right thing to do.
And yeah, it's some of the same with the other talks that Common Knowledge has had over the past several months on issues around permaculture and different approaches to farming, truly sustainable farming practices, not just the sustainable in terms of UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is actually unsustainable for humans and farms and otherwise. But some of the farmers that have come out, and it's interesting to hear how switched on some of the farmers are. And obviously, these are going to be people that work with the land and understand what supports life, because that's their job, is to support life, to support us with the food that we eat. It's been very interesting to hear, and some of them have been on UK Column as well, to listen to farmers that are actually putting these practices into place, as well as the health practitioners. So again, we're starting to see people that are offering alternatives to what we're told are the only options, which clearly are not working in a lot of ways for people.
No.
No,
I think, unfortunately, I did used to teach in ecology, and these farming practices are working with nature, not against it. It's not man dominating the area. It's saying, how does a natural system work? How can we work with it so that we get the best out of it? And to me, that's the way that ecology should go. It shouldn't be us trying to impose our technological way of doing things on nature. We should be working with nature.
Oh, absolutely. It's been really helpful to hear from them. And well, obviously, you're going to be an authoritative source on how nature works as someone who's worked in ecology. It's amazing to me how, because we're getting away from sort of this pro-human approach to life and to society, that it impacts everything, all of the systems, right? It impacts our food supply. It impacts our education system. It impacts our ability to just have normal human connections with one another. And this is why we have to continue to work locally, and then hopefully, as I keep saying, largely nationally, internationally, to fight this, so that we can get ourselves back as humans in a human society. Which brings me now to our most recent Common Knowledge event, which we can speak about here. I've still got the flyer here, which was called "You Can Do It: Inspirational Talks from Local People Making a Difference."
Yep.
And at the time of this recording, that was just less than a week ago. So this is why I really wanted to speak with you as soon as possible to get your reflections on this event. And so, as the chair of Common Knowledge, how did you decide that this was something that needed to be done next? And why did you set up the event this way?
Yeah, well, I think, as I probably explained, that one of the problems with being in some way alternative is you're always looking at what's going wrong and trying to react against it. And it's other people are calling the shots and you're trying to make the best of what's going on. And I think what we need is something which is proactive. We need to say, okay, we understand what the situation is. We've analyzed the situation. Okay, I understand it. What can I do about it? And the idea of the conference was to bring together people who'd seen a problem, analyzed it, and thought out how you might combat what was going on. And then they'd take an action. And that's the next step, is having analyzed what's wrong, to actually do something about it and show that you have enough power to go and out and do something about it. So we have somebody, actually a family who had originally been over in Canada, very high intensity agriculture. They were involved in huge numbers of pesticides being used, which were damaging the health of the farmers. And they and other people in the same family who had been trying to improve people's health through exercise, and they were getting nowhere. And they realized, what's the problem? People don't have proper food. People who are producing the food, they're being damaged. Okay, what can we do about it? And they decided to up sticks, come back, start out afresh and do things properly and start regenerative farming. So they were people who said, yeah, I understand the problem. I've analyzed it. I know what to do, and I'm going to do something about it. And they have. And to me, that is incredibly inspirational. They learned huge numbers of new things. They can now spread that knowledge to other people. So that was one group of people. We had somebody who was formerly a GP and now is basically re-educating himself and realizing that a lot of the things that he did in the past were actually wrong. And he came and told us about it, and he reassured people about your body being able to look after itself if you treat it properly, and how it can really heal itself. We had someone who used to be a primary school teacher and came out of retirement to head up a new school. And that new school has the values which he feels to be the proper values for education. Get away from technology, go back to people learning facts, give them the facts, give them the knowledge, and they can take away that knowledge and they can make the best of that. That gives them a grounding, a solid grounding from which they can take off. Get them to read well, get them to do their sums well. And once you've got the basics, you can take it away yourself. And that's what he's doing, and is really inspirational talk. And the other thing that he was talking about was setting up a school where we don't have this imposed sex education, which to me is taking away the innocence of children, which I value tremendously. I mean, I have grandchildren. I wish I could send my grandchildren to his school, because then they would get the very best in education and a huge grounding, and they wouldn't be worried about their gender or all that nonsense. They would just be little girls, and they would be doing things that little girls do, and they would retain their innocence for as long as possible. But then they would also have the grounding that when they met with the problems in the world, they'd understand how to cope with them. And then we had yourself, cancelled from academia, but you've turned your talents to the media and getting a media that we can be proud of, and something which is integrity. And we had people who set up our eco ring telling us about that. And we also had someone who was interested in trying to reform the political system. Now, that's a very tricky thing to do, but it is something which I guess a lot of us shy away from it. But ultimately, we would really like to have some people who, and we're all ultimately we're going to be paying taxes for any foreseeable future, and we need people in politics who will make use of those of all of that in ways which we approve of, and currently there's no accountability at all of what they do with the money which is given to the government, and we need to have people in place there who are there for the people. And so I think politics ultimately is going to be something that's very important in the future. So in all these cases, it was people who'd seen a problem and they'd said, right, I'm going to do something about it. And it was really positive. And I think you go away from something like that saying, yeah, we can do it. It's possible. It may be just a small thing, but and we have got amazing power. And if we could set up things like that going on lots of different places, then I think it would really improve the quality of life for a lot of people.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It's I think really important to show. Why I especially wanted to have you on, because this has been so important. And even though these are things that people are doing locally here in Scotland, and well, me recently now in the north of England, but I'm still close. That this is just something within our region. Where these are just examples of people doing different things, and just the value of us coming together to talk about what we can all do in our own areas of expertise. I think I said in my time when I was talking about the media that I have no idea about soil quality or protozoa or bacteria or anything, but I'll leave that to the farming people and I can talk about the media people. So one message I keep trying to get out is we all find what we can do and we work from there. And it's too overwhelming to try to think about doing everything. But maybe, as you know, we have, the person who is motivated to take political action and run for office, which is really interesting in Scotland this year with the Scottish Parliament elections coming up in May, to see what happens with that. We have media, we have education, we have farming, we have health, so all of these different areas, whatever that is that we can do, where we just need to do something. And I think that was what was really valuable about the day. I do want to mention as well, before I forget, that you also hosted Brian Garish for the Christmas party.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you maybe want to talk a little bit about what that was like on your end, because I know you were in a pub in Edinburgh and I was at home running the call for Brian. But how did the group react to those of you who were there in person?
Oh, it was incredibly positive. When you hear Brian's story from the very beginning, and actually the amazing things that happened to him and gave him guidance on his journey to setting up the UK column, to me that was wonderful. And he said many things about, it just seemed like I was being someone was telling me that this is what I needed to do. And I think probably we all have at the back of our minds, there are occasions where something says to you, yeah, this is something you must do. This is you're in this life. You can only do so much, but you can do something. And he heard that message and he did something about it. And that was tremendous. It also shows that every person has their own particular background. So they in his case, he would have a background in the forces. And of course, that would give him knowledge of certain things, a certain way of looking at things. And the way that he's gone about things is a very personal way of doing that. And that it's really good to hear about that people don't do things in the same way. Everyone is different. And that's the fascinating thing about life, is that everyone is different and everyone can do something. And because of their unique background, they can do it in a unique way. And I think people should think about themselves and think, well, I'm different from everybody else. I'm unique and I have certain things that I'm good at. And why can't I make use of that to help other people? And that was one of the things that kind of came out from what Brian was saying. It's, he has a particular background, and so he was in the right place to do what he did, and and people gather around. If people make the effort, then other people gather around them and help them. So it doesn't mean that people have to do things on their own. They will gather if they have the motivation. They will gather around other people, and things will snowball, and you'll get somewhere. So we had a great. I think it was probably over an hour with Brian speaking, and very personal. And it's really wonderful to hear about people's personal experiences, because that's what humans like to hear. They want to hear about stories about, what actually really happened from the horse's mouth, as it were.
Yeah, and that was really great to hear all that from Brian. And I've heard bits and pieces of it before at other events and in personal conversations, but to have it all together the way he told it that day, I thought was just amazing. And we put out the recording of that on the UK Column YouTube channel and on our live stream on Christmas Eve. And I wasn't sure if it would get any attention because it was Christmas Eve, but it did very, very well in terms of views. It was great to see that. And I think that just shows, especially during the holidays, when not everyone has a perfect Christmas, not everyone has wonderful family around them, and some people just need inspiration and sort of a feeling that they are part of something and motivation for the coming year, which I think maybe really speaks to the power that Brian's story has for others. And the fact that people were tuning in, listening to him over Christmas it just shows, thank you again for supporting and organizing that, because you made a difference to thousands of people over Christmas without even realizing it. I thought maybe it was just for common knowledge, but it reached a lot of places.
That's great.
So thank you for that. So what are you doing now? I know that we've had some conversations about your investigations as a researcher on viruses and how we get sick. And I think that's your current project, isn't it?
Yes. So I'm a biologist, but I didn't really know very much about viruses. That wasn't my area of expertise. I'm more in ecology and forestry and areas like that. But I have moved around within biology during my career. And what I've seen is that viruses have been used as weapons. The lack of knowledge of viruses, all of the stories that are put out about them have been used against us. And that continues to be the case, that these are supposedly things which are inevitably pathogens, and they're out to get us, and it's only through medicine that we're able to somehow protect ourselves from this. So what I decided to do, I'm a biologist. I must find out about what viruses really are, and I want to give the proper story about what viruses are. So that's something which has been a bit of an obsession for me for the last 4 or 5 months. And I want to put across a completely different idea about what viruses are. I think they're part of our normal biology, and that we don't need vaccines against them, and that it's quite difficult to research it in a way because people have a fixed idea about, and all the people who are researching in it have a fixed idea about what they are, and they don't even question that. And what I want to do is to question that and to try and provide the evidence that it isn't something that to be feared, and that I want people to be in a situation in the future where they cannot be used as a weapon against them. And that's through knowledge, and that's through understanding, and that's through changing people's ideas. I don't expect I'll be able to do that, to change people's ideas, but at least I might be able to make a start on that and to make use of all of the work that has been done to do that. Virus is a very divisive issue because there are, I think there's been deliberate attempts to divide the community of people who are dissidents by dividing them into no viruses or virus camps. It's a typical divide and conquer strategy. Yeah. And the only way of combating things like that is actually to find out what's really going on and to give people a proper understanding. And when you have a proper understanding, there's no need to have divisions. And yeah, I would like to be able to write cogently enough that people would be able to see through the fog that has been put there and all of the propaganda that's been put out there and continues to be put out there about viruses and how dangerous they are, and actually to see them as part of the normal biology of any organism. I guess I can't go into great detail about it now here, but I just want to get that across, that idea that they're not something external to us. I think they're something which is part of us. And in the same way that in regenerative farming we're working with nature, then we work with viruses in the same way. It's not something to be fought against and eliminated. It's something that we understand and therefore can work with in a positive way.
That's really helpful, and I can almost guarantee you that anyone watching this in the future, if they're with UK Column or have looked into the issue at all, is that you will see an immediate division. Someone saying viruses don't exist, a virus has never been isolated, all the way to, well, maybe there was something, all the way to, well, maybe not UK Column members, but people still saying there was a big scary virus that can still be caught from person to person, and they're still wearing their mask when they go out into the shops in 2026. Yeah. It's amazing how divisive that is.
It is, yeah.
And so
I expect to get a lot of flack for this, but but to me that doesn't matter, because I just feel like I was put on the earth to find out more about what goes on here, and to me that gives me the greatest joy to find out more about the living world, and if I can make a little contribution in that sense, then that would be great for me.
That's great. That's really great to hear about your inspiration for everything you've done through your academic career and that you still continue to do in retirement. I just find it so inspirational personally. So thank you for everything that you've done. I think we're just about out of time here, unfortunately. So I just want to ask you, is there anything else that you wanted to say about Common Knowledge or about what you've been doing or what you hope for the future, or just anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
Just get together with other people of like mind and have meetings face to face. It's amazing what will come out when you have conversations. Don't restrict yourself to commenting on social media about things. Go and speak with other people and have a great time, and you'll have a good laugh as well, because you'll find people who you can really open up to, and that's the time when you can have good jokes and you can really speak about the things that matter and are important to you. So yeah, be as human as you can. Get together with other people and form groups. It might be just a little group. It doesn't matter. it'll be a light in the darkness, and we get enough of those, we can go forward.
That's great. That's a great place to end. Thank you so much again, Richard, for your time. Really appreciate you. Again, this is Professor Richard Ennos, and I'm Diane Rasmussen with UK Column. Thanks for your time today, and thank you to the audience for listening. And thank you once again, Richard. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me.